Hi guys, it's Mrs. Moss here. And we're going to continue talking about landscape development, only now we're going to look at how a climate impacts the landscape. So in this diagram you see two very different climates. We have an arid, dry climate on the right and a humid or moist climate on the left. Let's look at the differences in terms of landscape features. On the humid side we have more gentle slopes. They are hilly, but you'll notice that they're much more gentle. And the soil is fertile, which is obvious from the presence of trees and plants along that slope. And there's a very thick layer of soil. The type of weathering in this climate, you may remember, is chemical weathering due to all the moisture. If we go and look at the arid side across the river, we see that the hills there are much more steep, and it's also more like a cliff. There's rocky soil, not nearly as fertile, so not much can grow. And also the weathering is physical weathering or abrasion. Here's some pictures of some arid and humid locations. Obviously, this with the presence of plants has a very humid atmosphere and a humid climate. And here is an atmosphere and a climate that is arid or dry. You notice the difference with the slopes. A change in climate can also create an ice age. And if we take a look at this was from our last ice age, and you see how this was covering most of the North America, and this is our last ice age 20,000 years ago, so that's when we were covered and that's when we were deposited. If you remember, we learned that New York State and Long Island was created from glaciers. Which leads us to glacial landscapes, because yes, glaciers have created a certain type of landscape. We may remember back that glaciers deposit unsorted sediments. Bedrock can become polished and striated or scratched by the sediments in the ice as it drags along, as it melts and advances and retreats. It drags along the unsorted sediments, creating these scratches. Glacial valleys are generally U-shaped valleys. Again, this is repetitive. You've learned this before when we were talking about erosion. While river valleys are V-shaped. So this is a picture of a V-shaped river valley. You see the different V's that are located throughout, all done by running water. Other glacial landscape features include U-shaped valleys, moraines, drumlins, kettle lakes, finger lakes, outwash plains, erratics, and escarpments. Now I'm not going to go through each one of these. You have the definitions there. You are supposed to write down 5 in your notes. We went through this when we were talking about erosion, so again, that's why I'm not going to spend a lot of time describing what each feature is all about. This brings us to coastal landscapes. Coastal landscapes are primarily affected by the actions of waves and ocean currents. Here's a picture of a shoreline, coastal plain. We're familiar with this type of area because this is where we live on Long Island. Longshore currents may create sandbars and barrier beaches, something like Jones Beach, Long Beach, and Fire Island. They were all created by longshore currents that go along the edge of the coastline. Now this is a really good picture here of a longshore current. What you notice along here is that this is where the current is coming from. And I know that because I see where the buildup of sediments are along the sides of the jetties. The jetties are these rock barriers that were put in place like walls to create deposition so that the longshore current that was running along there won't wipe away or erode all of the sand from the beaches. So townships put up these jetties, these rock walls, to block that sediment from moving further downshore as that current goes past. So you'll notice when you see an aerial shot of a coastline like this, you see that the sediment is built up in some areas along the backside of where the jetty is. And again over here, the sediment builds up because the current cannot get past this rock jetty. So therefore, the water slows down on that side, causing deposition to occur on that side of the jetty. So it's really a good way for townships to save the beaches and prevent erosion from damaging too much of their land. So jetties change the way sand deposits on the shore. Now humans also have an influence on landscapes, and in fact, we can make changes in the landscape in just a few months that it would take nature hundreds of years. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of what I'm talking about. But it also could take hundreds of years to remedy the negative effects of technology. And this is an example of how human activity has damaged the landscape in this area. This was a humid area. This is an area that's covered with trees. But what you notice in this barren spot where some trees have been taken down, this was all created by man and technology. We have chopped all these trees down in this area. So this is going to cause this area to be exposed to the running water and the other agents of erosion, causing that area that landscape to change over time, a very short period of time. Here's another example of how humans have created this interesting landscape, I guess we could call it, through a series of cutouts for agricultural reasons. Environmental planning and conservation can help and preserve our soil, our water, and our air, and our way of life. It also takes public awareness and cooperation, or all the laws in the world don't mean a thing. And we're going to end our landscape development discussion with this picture of us taking care of in this way. Thanks for your attention. Make sure you get all the notes down. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.